Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Hi, Kara.
Hello.
I've known you both a very long time. I'm insanely excited for this conversation, and I'm excited for it not just because I love you both and you're incredible business leaders and entrepreneurs, but because of what you've built with Angel City, which is, as an avid LA sports fan, I have to say, the best in-venue experience in town, and frankly, that I think I've experienced anywhere outside of a championship game. It is the most uplifting, inclusive, exciting, energizing sports experience that we get, which is one extraordinary thing to build. But beyond that, you have built the first women's sports franchise in the United States to reach a nine-figure valuation and the fastest growing women's sports franchise or male sports franchise in American history. And so neither of you comes to this from a background in sport. Right? Kara, you come out of corporate world and venture, and Julie, you've worked at big companies and you've started companies. So let me just start with you, Kara. How did we get here?
Well, I think, a lot of this is just having an insight and following your energy, or being, as I like to say, joyfully irritated at the right time. While neither of us came out of sports, Julie and I played sports our whole lives. Julie better than I did, for the record. And
What did you play?
we actually both played basketball.
Yeah.
And Julie was captain of her high school team. Yeah.
I was. Yeah.
And
all CIF.
Okay, now
Right.
we're
If we're
dropping
really
some
gonna talk
Sunshine
about-
League knowledge here. I was also captain of my team. I think we did pretty well, but we actually played against each other in high school, so we were rivals, and then walked onto the crew team in college. But we didn't come from it professionally. But I would say sports is very similar to consumer, to media, to unique IP platforms and businesses. And Julie and I are both lifelong Angelinos, so we had some exposure to that.
And so just for context, you both grew up in LA. You went to rival high schools?
Yeah,
Yeah?
we did. We went to rival high schools.
Okay.
Born and raised in LA. I went to Brentwood. Kara went to Westlake, which became Harvard Westlake.
Grew up in the Valley. I'm a Valley girl.
You're a Valley girl.
Yeah, I just want to state that.
We're not going to do the accent for this
State that for the
conversation,
record.
right? Valley girls make good. And so you guys played against each other in high school, but then did you know each other as professionals? Like what's the backstory of this relationship?
Both of us being women in tech, venture, our paths crossed a lot over the last 20 years. And I think more so me reaching out to Kara, getting advice about startups I was starting, or seeing if her fund would be interested in investing, or connections for opportunities and jobs. And the way I remember this is over the last 20 years, we have really established a mutual respect for each other with very different skill sets, where Kara is passionate and a visionary and comes from a world of investing. And I'm exactly the same, but come from the world of operating. And I think it was inevitable that our paths would cross at some opportunity. And I'm so fortunate it did with Angel City.
And so how did you end up not just paths crossing, but actually linking arms and getting started on this adventure together?
Yeah, I'll back up to prior to the moment that Julie came into it, which is really when it became what is Angel City. But there was sort of like a few years of accidental market research or intentional market research before that. So in 2015, I went to Women's World Cup finals with my three daughters, my husband, and my parents. And
where was it that year?
It was in Vancouver.
Okay.
And actually, I have this incredible photo of like being a mom trying to get two of her young daughters a photo with Alex Morgan in the stands, which is like a selfie with Alex, who, we now talk to a lot from the stands. And I was just a crazy fan trying to get my two daughters a photo. But we sat in the stadium, and the way I described it is, I was a 39-year-old working mom of three. I had like a 2-year-old on the ground without her shirt on, looking like a hoodlum. And I was just like so excited watching Carly Lloyd score. I didn't even know what she was doing. And I felt 12 again. It felt joyful. And it was like there was face painting and there was an audience. And I just, honestly, I think I was sort of came alive in a way sometimes we lose when we're just trying to keep all the balls in the air.
Right. So you had the personal connection. And was that where the spark came that maybe there's an investment opportunity here as well, an opportunity to build something, or did that come later?
No, I would say it was a building spark, to the extent I would say like that's where the joy came from. And I think this is like 50% joy and 50% irritation that kind of led to the spark. And so what do you want to do when you have joy in America? You want to buy stuff. And I went to 9 stores to buy a jersey for one of my daughters. Couldn't find any, right? Went to home, wanted to watch Crystal Dunn and Tobin Heath and Ali Long and all these players. And it was like it was being streamed from outer space for this league I didn't know existed called the NWSL. So that's where, I don't know if I'd call it, I mean, it was where the spark started. I didn't start though thinking it would be an investment or a company that we started. It started with, why won't anyone take my money, right? I had so much fun. You have now billions of people watching 90 minutes of the best players in the world, and you only get it once every 4 years, and then you can't find it?
Right. And historically, we've had boom bust cycles in women's sports, right? Where you've got a World Cup, you've got an Olympics, new stars are minted, there's all this excitement and energy, and then it wanes, right? And it waits a few more years to build. We'll come back to this later on because it feels like we've really come out of that and we're in full on boom mode at this point. But I'm curious, how do you make the leap from that spark and that joy and that frustration about not being able to find the kit for your kid or for yourself to actually deciding you're going to go on this adventure of building a club?
Well, I mean, that was 2015. And Julie and I mean, we'll get to the Julie part. I talk a lot in the beginning because those first, and then we'll pass it over to Julie, the day to day, like make stuff happen. But then we both work on it day to day these days. It really was a process of just honestly then began this process of like this curiosity journey of asking people, I don't understand. Why, am I the only person who wants to watch women play football more than every 4 years? And a lot of people said yes. Literally, Carrie, you're the only person. Everybody else just wants to watch it at the World Cup and maybe the Olympics and then not after. And it just instinctually, it didn't feel right. And I would say I had this instinct of like, there's something wrong here. And then a real linchpin for me was finding the players on Instagram.
Tell me more.
I mean, it was the only form of distribution where you could just put up your own content channel.
Right. Because at the time, the National Women's Soccer League was quite small. They didn't have a TV deal or a streaming deal, at least not one of scale, right?
Couldn't find it.
So you're actually going to the players' own social channels to find out what's going on, to follow them, to see the action.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you had players like Ashlyn Harris and Ali Long who just full access through their Instagram channels, right? Or Crystal Dunn or Alex Morgan. You had all of these players, but it's great content. And it was like you could, when you get activated, it's like when you get activated about someone or something or a show and you're reading Game of Thrones Wikipedia entry for until 3 a.m. Do you do that?
No. I don't. I'd rather watch the show than read about the show.
So that I do
and healthier
that.
sleep patterns
I'm
for
just
Julie
saying
here.
that,
I'm like a deep researcher when I get like culturally activated around something.
So, Kara, I want to get to where Julie enters the picture. So help me understand where we leap from spark in Vancouver at the World Cup final to fanning the spark, curating the flame on social media, to actually saying, oh, there's a real thing to do here.
I talked about it a lot. And it was sort of became my small talk, and it was something I wanted to see be different. And so eventually I met Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan and Crystal and Kristen Press and Tobin Heath. They were all starting businesses. And then I met a woman named Becca Rue who ran the U.S. Women's National Team Players Association. And Becca was like my mentor. And she asked me to be an advisor for the union, for the players union of the national team. And I said, sure. I don't even know what that means, but sure. And she said, well, help bring visibility to the pay equity fight. We're thinking about name and likeness revenue. That's the way we're going to get the players paid.
And to be clear, at the time, there was not pay equity, to put it generously, to put it kindly, between the U.S. men's team and the U.S. women's team, right?
100%.
Yeah, so there was actually a legal battle to achieve that. This
was before Alex Morgan drinking tea and Megan Rapinoe doing her, her big arm, here we are world kind of moment. And so it wasn't on the grand stage at the time, but basically I worked with Becca on building activations and bringing awareness to the tech community, the actress community. And then I learned the business because we had to learn name and likeness revenue. And Becca was working on One Team Partners at the time and things of that nature. So that was my education. And to some extent, I was a venture capitalist who was acting as a socialist.
Tell me, remind me the year you're at a Time's Up summit.
Yes. So this was a seminal moment. There were a lot of butterfly effects. And I was at a Time's Up summit, and I'd brought a group of women from tech there. And I was on stage. And at the end of these 2 minutes, I said, this is an incredible group of women here. Our job is to make this room bigger and bring new people in every day. But while you're here, go up to someone in another industry who you're interested in getting to know, who you'll probably never do business with, give them your number and go have a meal. And if they're weird, block them.
And you went up to
And
No.
No.
Natalie Portman came up to me
Look at you.
and she said, "Would you mind if I gave you my number?" And I didn't have to think very hard.
Right. That's kind of an intelligence test.
Queen of Star Wars says, "I'd like to give you my number." And anyway, and she literally put her name on my phone as Natalie P. She's still on my phone that way. And when we finally had a meal, we talked about just everything you can imagine in the world. In the last 20 minutes, we talked about soccer. And she said, "How can I help?"
And you said,
"Well, I said, your friends have bigger Instagram followings than my friends. So my friends are cool. You know how to build tech companies."
we all define cool differently.
But actually it was a part of it, right? Like the tech women wanted to meet the actresses and the athletes, and they wanted to meet the tech kind of investors and operators. And that's when Natalie and I really built a friendship. And so like the business part really started when Julie came in, but the lead up was like authentically building friendships over years,
Right.
you know, with Julie and I, and then with Natalie. And so after one of the events, and Natalie and I threw together after the 19 World Cup, she sent me text messages saying, "Let's start a team." And I just kept writing her long messages back about everything but that until I realized she was serious.
And was she already a football fan, a soccer fan, or was this really the beginning of her journey becoming a soccer fan?
She was, like through her son.
Okay.
So through her son who, you know, I asked her, I said,
Yeah.
"I've seen you in Black Swan. You obviously are athletic."
Yeah. An athlete. Yeah.
An athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to find power in your body and be an athlete,
Yeah.
right? And that's something we talk about a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's, she said, you know, I was surprised. My husband would wear a Messi jersey one day and a Rapinoe jersey the next day. And so she saw the world, what was possible through the eyes of her kids in a way that, even as one of the greatest gender equity and racial equity activists, opened her eyes to what was possible through that theater.
So, Julie, you've been an entrepreneur. You've started companies, and if you're starting a tech company, you know it's a pretty straightforward process, right? You're going to incorporate. You're going to probably raise a little bit of money from friends and family and get going and try to find a proof of concept and a product market fit. If you're starting a professional soccer team, the process is not quite that simple. So can you talk through how you two came together on this, and then where you went to figure out how to even get going and trying to get a team started in LA?
Yeah, it's very different. And the irony is the building of a sports team is a lot easier than the building of a technology team. And the people that are willing to help you do it are vastly larger than those that I experienced when I was building something in tech. Because when most businesses are built on the internet and everybody can be your competitor, everybody is your competitor. So they're not willing to open up their playbook, explain their cost of acquisition or their churn or their lifetime value or how they retain customers. That is their secret sauce. And what's so unique about sports in the most fundamental way is that it's a local business. So if I'm buying a ticket to an Angel City football match, I'm probably not buying a ticket to see Washington Spirit play. So we can share information in a very different way and apply it to our market in a way that's more authentic, where we're not competing. But to answer your question, yeah, I knew nothing about sports. Nothing about operating sports.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, when you have a vision to build a business, in most cases, you're building something that doesn't exist. And then you're not only proving product market fit, but you're proving that you will want this. So the first thing that I did was start to research, like, who are the best sports teams in the world and what makes them the best in the world, and who in my network has relationships with people in sports. The first thing that I learned, which was actually fascinating, was that 90% of all sports teams don't make money. So here's a business that everybody wants to be in.
Right.
Everybody wants to be an owner of a sports team. And when you look across the world globally, based on any league or any sport or any team, most of them don't make money.
Because they're toys for wealthy people, effectively?
Yeah, they're vanity projects. Yeah. You know, their salary cap far exceeds whatever they could generate in revenue from a local business, right? Ticket sales, sponsorship, merchandise, concessions. But it's a lot more exciting to say I own a football team than I trade equities, on the Nikkei, right?
It's social currency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that was really fascinating. And then I started to research, well, how do you make money owning sports? Because I don't want to build a business that I can't make money in.
So
That's not part of my DNA.
I want to come back to this in a minute, but I want to get the stage because you all have known each other a long time. You competed as high schoolers. You were sharing notes along the way.
You want to hear about the basketball game?
I want to know about the basketball game, which let's be clear. I want to be really clear. I know I'm not good enough to play in. So set the stage for us.
I'll tell this part of the story. So, Kara and I aren't the only venture and tech people in LA. It turns out there's a lot of women in our industry that grew up playing basketball. And we have a very good friend, our mutual friend, Robin Ward, who runs Founders Forward, who said, I'm going to create the Wild Feminists Who Tech Basketball League. And for maybe the last 8 years, we had opportunities to play 3-on-3 against each other every summer. On August 19th of 2019, Monday evening, there was a match. I call everything match now, and it's wrong. There was a game. In basketball, it's referred to as a game. There was a game, and I showed up, and Kara was there, and Robin, a bunch of our friends. And there was a little bit of basketball played that day.
But we played basketball. I was very sweaty.
Yes, there were some bloody noses, if I recall. When you get older, the elbows start to go everywhere, and it's dangerous.
We will not tell you who is a hack.
But it was really special because you had just come back from the World Cup.
Yeah.
And the women had won for the second time in a row. And Kara, by her relationships with the players and Becca, as she mentioned, she had some incredible experiences. And so you were telling us all these incredible experiences you had with the players and at the games. And when we were leaving, Kara and I were walking away from the court to our cars. And she said, Julie, Natalie Portman and I are thinking about bringing a women's football team to LA. You're an entrepreneur. You know how to build things. We're really busy. We have day jobs. Do you have any bandwidth to research this? And I'll introduce you to everybody I've talked to, and then you can see if there's a there. And if we like working together, then maybe we'll make that a real thing. And I looked at her and I said,
"You said hell yes?"
Natalie Portman? No, I did not say hell yes. Hell yes might have been like the third or fourth thing. First, it was like the Natalie Portman, and she said yes, and I said okay. And then I said, wait, there's women's professional soccer in the United States.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
Had no idea the National Women's Soccer League existed.
And it was
had
like
no
6 or
idea
7 years old.
It was in its 8th year.
Yeah.
So wait, I just want to be clear. This is less than 5 years ago as we sit here today, right? You're a huge. You're a serious athlete. I mean, you're a real athlete.
I appreciate that. And
you are.
All your listeners will let that.
No,
we'll let that
we were once upon a time.
Genuinely,
Yeah.
I heard somewhere that you were all CIF in
She
LA.
also
in high
played
school.
college. She played college basketball.
Yeah.
Julie and I can't play on the same team anymore because I'm not good enough for her.
Right. But even 4.5-5 years ago, you weren't aware that the National Women's Soccer League existed.
Correct.
Okay, and so Kara name drops Natalie Portman, right? Not a minor name drop. And you're intrigued by all the elements of this.
I'm intrigued by a couple of things. One, I'm an athlete. So the idea to build a team in your hometown for women, for unarguably the best athletes in the world at the sport that they do at a global level, the U.S. women's national team had proved every 4 years, time and time again, that they are literally the best in the world. So when you actually get the opportunity to build a product with truly the best ingredients in the world in your hometown, in your home city, I never ever thought I could actually work in sports. It's just not a field where I grew up thinking women played a major role. So to be able to change all of those narratives and then to build something that I'm truly passionate about. So once she said, yes, there's a women's professional soccer team. Yes, they're interested. I said yes right away. I said that was a Monday. That Sunday was an El Tráfico game. So LAFC against the LA Galaxy at BMO Stadium. It was a 3-3 tie. I'd never been to a soccer match before in my life. And I was blown away by what the LAFC fans in the 32-52 created. I mean, I'm a USC season ticket holder for football games. I've been to national championship games. I've watched SEC football games. Like, I know what fandom looks like. And soccer fans are different.
So I just want to pause here because as an entrepreneur who's worked in tech, you're going to your first professional. I'm going to use soccer instead of football because we're a disproportionately
Use
American
soccer
listenership.
and interrupt us because whatever
yes,
you
and
need.
thank you for permission to interrupt as a man talking with two women. But Julie, you're also a product oriented tech leader, and so when you're sitting there or standing there cheering on LAFC, Los Angeles Football Club. Are you looking at the team and the stadium as a product? Are you thinking about that way?
So there were 3 things that went through my mind. Yeah. One was, this is an incredible stadium, and if we were fortunate enough to play here, there's no better backdrop for bringing women's professional football soccer to LA. Second, I was really blown away by the fact that it was a sold out crowd of 22,000 fans and that they'd sold out every single game since they launched. And the reason that was so unique and surprising is that there is an incredibly successful men's MLS team currently in LA, which is the LA Galaxy, who've won multiple championships, who consistently sell out their stadium of 27,000. And LAFC came onto the scene, created a second MLS club, and was so successful that they're selling out their games. So immediately I thought, well, the audience for soccer in Los Angeles is pretty large.
Yeah.
If you can have two men's teams, it's got to be large enough also for a women's team. And the third thing, which is a little bit maybe more on the nose, but in the middle of the fan section, the 3252, there was a couple individuals waving a flag that read, "Bring the NWSL to LA." And to me, that's sort of the opposite of Field of Dreams, right? It's like, we will come if you build it, right? And so that was sort of the, hey, there's going to be an audience for this if we build it right.
Did it feel like divine intervention?
Absolutely.
I mean, it really did. I mean, I called my new women's sports fund Monarch Collective because of all the butterfly effects that led to Angel City. And like, there's 20 others we could tell you about. But I mean, I will say I love to give a little love letter to Julie, which I'll probably do throughout this. But I do remember that first conversation a little differently. But
how so? Wait, how so? I want to hear it. How so?
Wow. Yeah.
I knew it was a little bit of a hard sell to get somebody of Julie's talent to want to run a non-existent women's soccer team, you know? And so I kind of oversold it and undersold it. And part of it was like, I also take Julie's life and livelihood seriously, right? And so I said to her, I was like, hey, we have this crazy idea. I think I told you it was a crazy idea.
Remember that.
And I said, I've sort of been working on it for a while, and I think it's just about to become real. But if it becomes real, we need someone to run it who's extraordinary, right?
So you teased that opportunity.
But I also want to, like, I really am like one of those people who likes to set expectations with people I want to work with in different ways my whole life. And I said, and I'd reached out to a few people, and I sort of was like, why don't you just I'm going to a game with Natalie Portman. I'm going to this El Tráfico game with Natalie
think about that.
Portman. I've got some
nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I have some extra tickets.
The kids' birthday parties, forget about it.
What kids? What are you talking about, kids?
And Beckaroo, right?
Yeah,
And anyway, I'm like, and do you want to come with us? And so you get Julie into a live stadium that's like, I just knew it was going to be a lot easier after she saw that.
The funny thing is, and I think you know this, the next weekend there was an LAFC match. I bought 6 tickets and brought my sister and her kids and my kids. Like, it is something like, there's just the fandom around soccer is so special. And then again, the idea that, God, if we could build this for women's football, we're going to change the game.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kara.
No, and I was going to say, and then, I mean, really, like, there's so many pieces to it. We didn't end up launching the team. We can get to that, or funding the team for like another 7 or 8 months. Julie and I, like, we were working, like, we kind of just would pass the baton back and forth, and like, you know, so many people would tell you why it didn't work, and just sort of getting to what's the one thing you need to get right? Like, what's the one assumption?
So what's the one thing?
Butts and seats.
Okay.
And in a weird way, it's sort of like super simple. The whole model worked if you could get 9 or 10,000 people to show up 12 times a year. And I'm like, this is a city of 15 million people, where if you can do something entertaining once, people, like, if they love it and they feel a part of it, they'll come back, they'll come back, they'll come back. And there had been a team in LA for 1 year. And I think one of Beckaroo loves to talk about this.
Years ago. This is like 8, 9
2010.
years ago. Yeah.
It's called the LA Soul.
Yeah.
And I'll come to that in a second. But I think as a venture capitalist, you know, and I was an operator for a little while, but I leave the operating to Julie. But as a venture capitalist, you're kind of looking at the future as much as the past. And it was sort of like, how do we convince people that our assumptions made sense, thinking we would do much, much better than them? And I think we did be even better than we thought because of a bunch of things, including Julie's extraordinary leadership and execution. It's not, you know, you have to hit markets at the right time, but you have to have the right leaders. So the Soul played for 1 season, and 10,000 people would come to their games.
Wow.
And so we built the whole model off of the idea that that was the only data point we had. And what did we hear? LA has 11 or 12 other professional sports teams. People like the sun and the beach. People don't come to things. Like, guys, we have a city of 15 million people. We need 10,000 people to come 11 or 12 times a year.
And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but if my history is right, the Soul folded because they didn't have funding, right? They just didn't have
Correct.
enough capital to get there. So there are at least three, and there are probably more, you'll tell me, but for causes, things you have to check, conditions precedent to being there. One, you need funding. Two, you need a stadium. And three, you need the National Women's Soccer League to say you get a franchise. What's the sequence of those three things, and how did that play out for you all?
Well, the sequence today is different as the league has really grown. But when we were talking about doing this back in 2019, early 2020, there was no commissioner. So
Wait, there was literally no
there was
commissioner
no
of the National
commissioner
Women's Soccer League, of the
apart.
NWSL.
The first commissioner joined the NWSL in 2020. So when
How do you operate a sports league without a commissioner?
we weren't there at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. You basically have the owners sort of make all the decisions together. And so that's what happened. One of the owners of the Portland Thorns, Merritt Paulson, who's, a good friend, and really played a pivotal role in building the National Women's Soccer League, was sort of the de facto person in charge of expansion.
This is for the sports fans a little bit like Bud Selig putting himself in as commissioner while he's owning a team. This is in baseball.
But
This
no,
is,
but I mean, it was
not
like
even.
everyone who was there at the time was doing it because they knew, like, everything from it was the right thing to do to, they could see the future around how money would be made. But like the people who were doing work then were doing work because they were true zealots and believers. And I think it's important to celebrate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, so the chronology, we had this basketball game on a Monday. That following Sunday, Becca, Natalie, Karen, and I went to the LAFC Galaxy game. And 2 weeks later, Karen and I were up in Portland going to see a Portland Thorns game. We wanted to see what a women's professional soccer game looked like. And the Portland Thorns were the leaders in the league at the time, over 15,000 fans. And again, Merritt and Mike sort of opened their books to us, explained how this works. Like, how does a league work? How does a team work? What do you need to do to be successful? And we shared our vision. And again, you have to think about it from his point of view. You have two people come up to Portland, neither of which have sports experience, right? Neither one of us have the net worth requirements to actually fund a team. But we have the passion and the vision and the excitement around it. And I think he was even surprised by how committed we, and then as well as Natalie was. And by the end of the day in the game, Merritt said, look, if you can raise the money and get one of the two stadiums on board, I don't see any reason why you couldn't get
One
the
of the two
expansion fee.
stadiums that were then in use for the
Dignity Health
Major League
or-
Soccer.
yeah.
And that's an important component that I think we can kind of like correlate to the tech world, which is we were at a point in time from an infrastructure standpoint where you could do the asset light model of women's sports, right?
What do you mean by that, Karen?
Well, building stadiums can cost anywhere from $100 million to SoFi is
a gazillion, I think.
Billions.
Yeah.
And so the stadium experience, the arena experience in sports is critical to having a great experience. So in LA, you have two stadiums purpose-built for soccer, but you also have the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum. And so you had a number of options where you could bring an incredible experience like without needing to build a stadium. And if you go around the United States, like soccer stadiums in the United States are our modern civic infrastructure.
Right.
It's the most modern, the most newly built. They're all of our modern coliseums.
So I want to just roll back a half step, because you're up in Portland and you're told at the end of this kind of magical day, at what sounds like just a couple few weeks of diving in, if you can raise the money, you all can have a franchise. How much money?
Yeah, well, so by the way, that was October, right? Yeah. And I mean, there's a couple things. I think it's important to say that I think Julie and I and Natalie and all the people around us at the time, Becca, we showed up credibly. We worked our butts off, right? We researched every data point in the market. We called every human being we knew in sports. We read every book on the Sounders, Barcelona, everything. And so I think we impressed them with the prepared mind, the work we did, the way we thought we were going to execute, what direct marketing looks like, things that we had learned in tech and media that had never been brought into women's sports. And Portland was the only example of a team that was filling stadiums, but still shared all of its commercial operations with the men's side of the house. So the only thing that was Thorns specific was the soccer organization. And so I do want to say that because I think it was a magical day, but I think Merritt was impressed with our backgrounds and our commitment and conviction. In terms of how we raised the money, the honest answer is, I mean, this was the thing I was supposed to know a lot about. And I remember saying to Julie, I don't know if we're raising $500,000 or 50 million, and I don't know if who we're raising it from.
Right.
I do know it's not going to take $500,000. It's probably going to take a lot more, like 50 million. But I know we just need to get into business, and so it was definitely not hammer nail. And I think we created a funnel of lots of different kinds of investors, and we had certain criteria that we were looking for. But ultimately, we started by getting the women who were the most passionate about it. So Eva Longoria was our very, very first check.
Well, there's a little bit of a chicken egg here, right? You don't know how much you need to raise, or did you have a number in mind of what you needed to get to?
We had a number, but it wasn't that, it wasn't even that easy, right? You always haggle over like, what's the valuation and how much you need to raise. But we had a lot more barriers walking in the door to begin with. First, you had 3 female founders that had no experience in sports. You had 3 females. Right? I mean, that was a huge impediment when we walked in the door. And then it wasn't just about building a women's football club. And that's what makes Angel City so special and why we're so valuable. And all those stats you shared at the beginning, it's because we wanted to build it differently. And this really came from Natalie from day one. I was focused on, I want to build a business that makes money. Right. If I want to change the narrative around women's sports to say that it's investable and there's growth opportunity, and there's huge value, I have to show that I'm better than 90% of the teams that we all take for granted.
Well,
right?
and importantly, I mean, look, professional women's sports has largely been looked at as a cause more than a business,
That's right.
at least in the US, if not around the world. And so your orientation as business people who've had the successes and failures, who've lived the entrepreneurial journey, who've been investors, right, is really important for the credibility here. And notwithstanding that experience, you're still walking into rooms and being like, that's cute.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, most of the people that we met that were in women's sports, if you ask them why they were in it, it was because I have a daughter. I have a granddaughter, which, by the way, is not a bad reason. It's not a bad reason.
However you get into it, you get into it.
Right. But we wanted to walk in and say, no, women's sports is valuable. Look at this product. Look at these women. Look at how they perform on the global stage. If we actually gave them the same level of attention and investment of a men's team with a stadium and a game day experience and compensation, imagine what could be possible. Again, when you're not only working with the best players, but the best players in the world. This isn't a US-based sport, right? This is a global sport. And so we walked in saying, hey, we're going to make money, which sounded kind of foreign. The second part was, we're going to lead with purpose.
Okay, so it's the 3 of you, right? The 2 of you and Natalie Portman, and you're going out to raise money and you're being told some version of, that's cute, that's nice that you all are doing this. How many no's before you get a yes?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it was the 3 of us. Like, I think it's really important that people know that Natalie was in the room with us pitching. This was not a project and name only for celebrities, which I think is a lot of celebrities get the rub for. But Natalie was really invested and involved in this from day one. We got over 99 no's, and it was from everything from, there's 11 professional male sport teams, 11 professional sports teams in LA. There's the beach, there's the mountains. Women's sports isn't investable. Women's sports has no growth. People aren't going to show up. Is this a charity or is this a business? Right. And then, of course, the more reasonable no's were like, what do you know about sports? Like, that's fair. Like, I'll give them to that was fair. But I think the challenge that we ran into often was that we really were pitching a different type of company. We wanted to build a company where mission and capital could coexist, where we wanted to have a positive impact in the community while we were building a women's professional team, and we were going to invest in that team. When we would talk about the experience of Angel City, Natalie would talk about how she wanted to recreate the Showtime era of the 1980 Lakers, where you were coming to a game either to see Magic Johnson or to see who Jack Nicholson brought courtside. That was the vibe that we were going for. So we were going to invest in the experience. We were going to invest in the players and pay them as much as we possibly could. And we were going to invest in our community and try to change this model of pay to play for youth women's soccer so that everyone had the opportunity to play. And then everyone had the opportunity to become a professional women's soccer player because they saw Angel City.
So you've got this tremendous trio of the 3 of you. You've got mission, you've got vision, you've got a compelling business plan, having done all this extensive research. Were you surprised that you were getting these 99 no's?
Yes. I mean, I think one of the people are like, what is it about your partnership with Julie or Natalie? And who knows? I mean, I could give you a million reasons why, but I think one key reason why is Julie and I were never down at the same moment.
Yeah.
You were basically,
And Natalie too.
at least one of you
Yeah.
was the one saying, we can do this, we can do this, we can make it through this.
When those 99 no's we were really looking for someone to own Angel City. We're like, hey, here's our idea, here's our vision, here's what we want to build. We need you to own like 85% of it and fund it,
Wow.
right? Because that's traditionally how sports teams worked. And it was really hard to get someone as passionate about our idea who was willing to fund pretty much all of it.
But Julie, can I pause you? Because this is interesting to me, because you both come out of tech where that's not the model. You're not selling 85%
that's right, but
to someone.
That is the unique part right there. It is not the model in sports. And after the 99 no's, I don't know if you remember this, but we had a phone call. It was basically New Year's Day on 2020. And you called me and you said, if we can't figure this out, like, I don't know how much more we can go at this. Like, we've talked to everybody. And we sort of had this epiphany.
That was my down moment.
That was your down moment.
And
right.
we had
Start the year off
yes.
with a real bummer. Yeah.
But it was sort of that epiphany that we're not going to the right people. We're not going to the people who understand that we're truly building a platform for equity and impact, and we're going to use that platform to drive towards equity using sports. And then Natalie said, well, why don't I introduce you to Eva? Like, she loves sports. She's a fan. She's a friend. Why don't you pitch her?
So this was the way into other celebrities?
And there was another moment, too, that you probably don't remember, where I remember, and Natalie said to me, it seems to me that we're all working around the clock. And is this the way it works in your industry, that we do all the work, but somebody else owns it? Because she's like, that just doesn't seem right. I remember her saying that to me, and I'm like, actually, no, that is not the way it works in tech. You start with founders, the people doing the work, having sweat equity and bringing people in. And so that is, I mean, I think when we changed our mindset around, this is a very risky venture. One of the reasons we got from some of the people we really wanted to fund this, who are now really active in women's sports and sports, was you guys could succeed, but the league will fail. And there's too many dimensions of risk around things that are outside of your control, which I'd have completely different answers for now than I did then. But we were learning, and we were sort of balanced between seeing the future and believing we were on the right side of history, and calling shots that we knew we could deliver against. And by the way, I mean, again, a lot of this comes down to picking the right co-founder, and Julie being who she is from a mission standpoint and an execution standpoint. But I looked at our numbers the other day from our original deck. So
pretty staggering.
So we did 4x the revenue that we told investors we were going to do in our first year. And I've been involved in building, as has Julie, really successful tech business. I was involved in getting Tinder going at IAC. It was the highest revenue growth I have ever seen in any tech company. There are companies that have grown users more so, but the reasons we heard it wasn't going to work in the beginning from people who ended up being deeply involved is they said, you're never going to get media revenue.
From when you say media revenue, you mean a league-wide media deal like the NFL or NBA or MLS
right? If you look at the
right?
pie for the NFL, which is the most successful commercial league, you know a ton about it. How much of the revenue comes from their media? I mean, it's $125 billion in global media revenue.
For sport.
For the NFL. 125 billion over 10 years.
Okay, right. Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, but by the way, that stat right now, women's sports globally, all women's sports generates about $1 billion in total revenue. Men's sports, it's $500 billion. You want to talk about venture? We are a fraction of a percent. You just kind of, you pick the right sport in the right country in the right way, and you're just media revenue is now flowing in, but people didn't believe that was possible.
Opportunity was off the charts if you believed. So I want to go back to New Year's Day 2020. We're a couple months away from COVID hitting. We don't know that this is coming.
I know.
You, Kara, are feeling kind of down in the dumps. Julie's like, we got this, we can do this. And Natalie's the one who doesn't come from business or from tech, who's asking the question that unlocks maybe we're thinking about this the wrong way, and then makes the introduction to Eva Longoria. And what happens when you talk?
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredible pitch. So Eva was on the line with her business manager, and I think it was just me.
I was not.
Yeah, it was the first meeting. Even Natalie wasn't there.
You should pitch more without me, Julie.
And I'll preface this by saying, she's an amazing human. And you're on this call and it sounds like Eva, and I'm visualizing Eva. And I'm like, how am I talking to the star of Desperate Housewives right now about Angel City? So I do this spiel and I talk a lot about the fact that we want to build a platform. And when I was done talking, I think the first thing she said was, "I'm in."
Wow.
And I
You
said,
got
"Wait,
the yes in the room.
it was it was the first yes we got." And I said, "What do you mean? Like, why? Why are you in?" And she goes, "I get it." She goes, "I'm a platform. Like, I use my platform to push forth my social causes that I care about, and also my latest, movie or television show or directorial debut. Like, I understand the power of a platform, and I think what you're doing is incredible, and I think this would be amazing for women's sports. And if we can use sports to change the narrative and drive to equity," she's like, "I'm all in." And not only was it the first yes, but it was the largest check we got to date. It was the largest check we got until we raised our Series A. And she's been an incredible support from an individual.
So how do you go from that yes, that, oh my gosh, we got the yes, to actually then having enough capital raised to do this?
Let me do the syndicate part really quickly and we can get into operating. So our second yes then was from Alexis Ohanian, and he put both himself in personally and his fund. And then, and at the same time, and then all of a sudden,
he's better known as Serena Williams' husband,
yes,
by the way.
yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I think actually alongside Eva coming in, it's when there's this famous picture when Natalie and I threw an event to bring visibility to the pay equity fight for the friendly game at BMO Stadium, April 19, where you had Jessica Chastain and Uzo and
Jennifer Gardner.
And I mean, like, Jennifer Gardner's at almost every game, and she loves it. And Lily Singh and Abby Wambach and Glennon Doyle and now, Billie Jean King and Lindsey Vonn, and then all my tech friends whose names you won't know, Layla Sturdy and Sarah Harden, and just like incredible people. And this community came together, and the way we built and then we got the yes from Julie Foudy and Mia Hamm. And that was, I think, for me, the most special moment when we were building this, like our heroes. And even Julie and I were this weekend with Brandy Chastain and Julie Foudy, and we were like, she said to me, she's like, this is why we did it, you know? And I mean,
it was special.
It was special.
But it was a little bit of that snowball, right? Like, it's the first yes is the hardest. But once you can talk about why that person said yes, and then you try to find like investors.
Yeah.
Who else has a platform? Who also understands platform? Who also understands you don't need to sacrifice mission for capital. You can do both at the same time. And it completely changed how we went about fundraising.
So there are two threads I want to pull on here. One is the celebrity thread, and the Natalie reference to the Showtime Lakers is incredible, right? It's coming to see Magic or coming to see who Jack brought, and you just rattled off a who's who of Hollywood celebrities who are at almost every game. I mean, there's Sophia Bush, there's Gabrielle Union, there's Jennifer Garner. I mean, it's one after another, right? It's incredible. So I'd love to understand, did you know that was going to be part of the strategy, or did that evolve? One, and then two, Julie, I want to go back to this point that you made about the first game you went to, where you saw the sign in the stands, right? And if you bring it, we will come, that moment. And how you think about both celebrity and community and how you've built Angel City.
The celebrity aspect was unintentional. Again, the celebrities and athletes signing on board is because we realized they were a segment of people that understood what we were building. We didn't have to explain it. They didn't ask if it was a charity. That never even crossed their minds. But we realized very quickly the power of a celebrity, and their reach on social is significantly bigger than Angel City plus all of our players. So if you can harness their reach to tell our story, to build attention awareness, that can ultimately drive revenue and then drive impact, then we're something special. And when I talked about researching at the beginning, it was also about the power of being a global brand. If you're a global brand, not only can you change mindset and change culture, but you will make the most money possible because you have a global audience. So how do we take what's so special about Angel City and our values with setting higher expectations and not sacrificing mission for capital and make it a global brand so that everybody in the world wants to know about Angel City, wants to wear an Angel City hat, and wants to come to an Angel City game? And that our ownership group of celebrities and athletes played a really big role of driving attention awareness for who we were and what our ultimate goal was, which is truly driving for equity. They don't help us sell tickets. They don't help us sell merch. Like, their audience is broad, right? But they help us tell the story. And if we do our job right, we can convert the people that pay attention to our story. One of my favorite stories is a sponsor that we have. And we went in there to do a pitch and we said, hey, we're Angel City. And the man that we were talking to said, I just want to tell you something. Like, I'm actually not a big sports fan. I don't follow sports. I don't really care. But I know all about Angel City because I follow Sophia Bush.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was a big game changer.
And I also like to talk about this in the inverse, which is, yes, some of our community investors have much bigger social media followings than any of us. But what I think matters most and what's replicatable in every market is they cared. They show up at games.
That's
So
right.
I had 3 slots for friends I could bring in. I brought in a woman named Heidi Patel. She introduced me to Beckaroo. She comes down for every season opener. She brings people. She talks about it all the time. Sarah Harden, who, CEO of Hello Sunshine.
Reese
We
Witherspoon's company,
Right.
not a small thing.
Yeah, well, and Sarah Harden's company, like they did
Yeah,
it together in a very similar way. But like Julie and I probably talk to Sarah 3 times a week, and she's not formally on our board. She's been informally advising us, and this is media, this, that, and the authenticity of how you build communities so that you want to show up to games and give someone a hug that you're excited to see, and the friendships
Yeah.
that have come out of this community. You can do that in Philadelphia, in Portland, in Kansas City. You can really do that anywhere. And so I think it is building cap tables with intentionality to represent the people on the field, women, people of color, people of different sexual orientations, that community. My dad's a doctor in LA, my mom's a teacher of the deaf. They feel like the Annenbergs when they go to games because they're so proud of, or the Gettys or whomever, they're just so proud to be a part. It's like the country club. I was never in a country club. It's like a country club for people who can buy tickets for, what's our cheapest ticket?
Well, you could stand for $15.
$15.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm struck when I come to games by the experience outside the stadium, even before I get inside, the energy, the way the community shows up, and what you program outside. So how does that whole
Yeah.
experience? How do you think about that?
So we look at game day as a day. We want you thinking about Angel City from the moment you wake up, on your way to the match, before the match, during the match, and after the match. We create an incredible fan fest where there's experience for everyone because we are so intentional about our fan base being representative of LA. And to Kara's point, a lot of nationalities, different age, different sexual orientations. Like, we want to be reflective of our community. So we want an experience that's any person from our community can feel that's welcome. So we have a pregame experience. After the game is over and we open the sunset deck so everybody can go and mingle and talk and hang out and continue to build a sense of community and belonging together. And that sort of goes to your second question, which is, yes, the celebrities bring the attention and awareness, but ultimately we need a community that cares about Angel City beyond the wins and losses and cares beyond who the 11 starting players are. So if you sign up to get tickets because you love Kristen Press and she's in our starting 11, and in our 4th game she tears her ACL and hasn't made it onto the pitch in the year and a half, you're still coming to games. And we did that by including our community in the building of Angel City.
Say more about that, Julie. Will you help us understand?
I
Because
mean,
I think a lot of business leaders struggle with how to go to their customers and actually bring them into the process. So how did you do that?
Any company that is truly successful has an audience or a fan base or a customer base that is emotionally connected to that company. And when I say emotionally connected, that means they'll pay more for a product that may have inferior components, right? Or they may pay more for a product that isn't as good as something that's like it. But you care about saying, I have an Apple phone, right? Or I care about driving a Tesla, right? And so with Angel City, it was like the only way to create that emotional connection from the beginning. A year and a half before we had a coach or a player or even played a game was to go to the community and say, what is important to you? And so we included them in picking out our colors and in designing our crest, and to talk about which organizations we wanted to support and how we wanted to support them. And as we created our impact platform of equity, essentials, and education, how we would bring that to life. And it was truly about creating a relationship with our community. Our 3rd or 4th hire was head of community. We do 250 events a year.
In person.
Outside of the games.
Yes.
Wow.
To create that connection, because at the end of the day, sports is about community. And all we're doing is creating an opportunity to create belonging and to create community. And Natalie says this very well, which is you can do more things together than you ever can alone.
Yeah.
So if we really want to drive to equity, and we know that's going to take time, whether that's pay equity, gender equity, visibility, media attention, if we all do it together, it'll happen a lot faster.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say a couple of things that are relevant to the master's scale community. One is we looked at consumer communities, right? And we study them in sports, but we come from them in tech. I mean, Julie had like
Mm.
one of the biggest Kickstarter raises ever for an open source Android gaming console. I, bought and ran a community called Urban Spoon. And those types of companies were built on like early consumer communities before there was Slack and this, that, and the other. And one anecdote I was just thinking about as Julie was talking is in the beginning, the Rojas's, the people who were waving that flag that Julie saw at that first game, were the first two community members for our first supporters group.
Yeah.
And I remember one time during COVID, I was driving in our minivan through, like I was literally at a motel in Utah, or yeah, near Zion. And my sister came to me and she was wearing an Angel City mask and she said, "Somebody knows what this is." And I told them, "I'm your sister." And not only that, but they've heard of you. They know who you are. I'm like, "What are you talking about? Don't you? That's crazy." And I went and I sat outside at a table with these two women in the middle of this motel courtyard. And they were part of the first 1,000 people that were communicating every day in Slack, this community that
Wow.
Catherine had set up with Julie in the early days. And that's kind of when I like knew something was going to happen. And it's very similar to anything you're building. It's like, who are the first 2, 3, 5,000? And then we have this beautiful advantage, which is we get to gather,
Yeah.
and then, I mean, I think the second part of it is we really thought creatively about business models and revenue streams and how we could take something that many people thought was crazy, like our 10% model where we gave back to community, and turn that into actually one of the many reasons where like our cap table, our leadership, our representation is driving enterprise value and revenue in a way where people started to pay attention to this DEI, which no one talks about anymore, because it drove outcomes, not just because it was the right thing to do, because diversity of thought for cultural institutions is important in driving revenue and outcomes and people caring about it.
I mean, there's so many different threads we could pull on here, and if we had 3 more hours, I would go on all of them. This 10% pledge, can you just explain what that is? And then I really want to jump into the first season and a decision that
Yeah.
you all made, which is not intuitive to most business leaders, but seems like it was critical to building the foundation of the club and the fan base.
Um, it was really important that we are authentic from the beginning. You have Natalie Portman, you have Eva Longoria, you have Jessica Chastain and Jennifer Garner, Abby Wambach, Mia Hamm. We didn't want people to think that they were supporters in name only or investors in name only. To Kara's point, what made this so meaningful was that they believed in our purpose and they showed up. And so we wanted to be really authentic about how we showed up in our values. And we didn't want to say we cared about the community without showing it. Um, I grew up, in a world where you would have a community service day. Like there'd be one day a year. And it's like, hey, I care. But that's not authentic. And so we said, okay, if we're going to be authentic and really lead with purpose, every single thing we do is going to have purpose. Everything. So when we announced Angel City in July of 2020, we announced a 3-year partnership with the LA 84 Foundation, the Play Equity Fund. When we announced BMO as our stadium, we did a food drive with the Boys and Girls Club of North Hollywood. When we started selling seat deposits for tickets, we said, well, how do we get back to the community? And so we partnered with Nike and said, for every seat deposit we sell, we'll donate a sports bra to a young girl in need. So by the time of our first game in April 2022, we donated 22,000 sports bras. But then it was, how do we hold our partners accountable? If you're going to become a sponsor of Angel City, if you're going to be a fan of Angel City, how do we know that you share our values? Well, the answer was simple. You put your money where your mouth is. And so we developed the first of its kind, the Angel City sponsorship model, where 10% of our sponsorship dollars would go back into the community, into this platform that we were creating of equity essentials in education. To date, we have 19 partners. We put $2.5 million to work. We've given out 1 million meals with DoorDash. We've supported the development and then hiring of 136 coaches as part of the Gatorade coaching network. We have Footy Fridays, where we've now coached over 2,000 kids in both leadership and coaching. We have a internship program with Birdies, where we take BIPOC high school students so they can learn not only the business, but have something on the resume so that when they're applying for college, they have, something of substance. And so every single partner we went to, it wasn't, this is our reach, this is our number of tickets, this is our DMA. It was like, no. What do you care about, and how can we create a program in our community to show that we care together? And yes, you're going to get your LED time and your radio spots and your TV spots, but we're going to activate for the entire year. And what was so special about that was we started having conversations in 21. anybody that signed up to be a sponsor sponsored us in 21, again, before we had played a game and before we sold the ticket. So now we have 35 sponsors. We have, again, spent over, committed 2.5 million to the community. We have over 60 million in committed sponsorship revenue. That 10% of that is going to go back into the community. We then took it a step further and said, it's not just our sponsors that play an active role in driving authenticity and value for our community. It's our fans and it's our players. So how do we get them involved?
So let's talk about the players, because season 1, Kara, you all made a decision that I don't think I've ever heard of before, which is no transfers, no trades, the equivalent trades, no one cut. If you're signed to Angel City, you're with Angel City for this season. How did you all make that decision?
I'm gonna let Julie take that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a recommendation from our sporting director, and her viewpoint was, this is an expansion team, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be tough, and we're going to have ups, and we're going to have downs. But if we know that we can count on each other, and we are with it and with each other for the whole year, we might be able to do something extraordinary. Not coming from sports, that sounded amazing to me, right? I was like, great, we're going to get these players. You're Angel City. We're going to do this together. Like, this is wonderful.
But if your goalkeeper's not cutting it.
Cut to midway through the season and Kristen Press hurts herself, right? And you see opportunities for growth. You see opportunities to improve. It actually hurt our ability to make change in the middle of the year. So that was.
But it feels like it was important to get the players really invested in everything you were doing, just being
it
on
was
the pitch.
A controversial decision. It did hurt, I think, our ability to make changes when everybody else was making changes. And it was something we've only done for the first year. We don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But it did ring true to our values, despite the fact that it might have been challenging in that first year.
I also think it just speaks to like convex thinking. And
say more.
I mean, it came up a lot for me in the early days of COVID and conversations with Julie or my husband, which is like, what if people never go into a stadium again? What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's where, it's like startup 101 stuff. It's where uncertainty can be your friend versus like everyone else is going to go to a certain model. And it's the ability to make mistakes, right? It's the ability to do all the first principles, question asking, and figure out where are you going to do things like give players a percentage of gate revenue when we were the first team to do that, because they're your biggest asset in telling people about the games, and they'd never been affiliate marketers and they didn't make much money. So why not do that? But we also got some things wrong, right? And so it's like this idea though that I remember was like, what if no one's going to go in a stadium again? And Julie and I were like, well, how could we use that to our advantage? Like we have never had a game before and we're always said we're going to be bigger than the pitch. What can we do digitally? How do we connect our community? And so we did all of these things with our community digitally. We had a year delay into launching. Right. And so it's just like startup thinking, I think, and not being afraid of making mistakes and bringing your board along on that journey.
So it's a great transition to this past season, which I'm going to use we because I'm an ACFC fan.
Every game, Jeff, every game. We love you.
If you haven't been, you haven't lived.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is a spectacular experience being in the stadium. And I'm grateful to be part of the community. We had a hard start to the season last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what happened there, and what did you learn about how you had to make changes, what you had to do differently, and did you almost adopt like a refounder's mindset given the challenges you were facing? I mean, what was going on there?
Can I tee it up and then you'll do all the substance?
Go for it.
Perfect. I think that we refounded the team in every dimension probably in the last year in terms of how do you think about stakeholders? How do you think about capitalization? How do you think about the soccer operations? How do you look at where the three of us and everyone who came around us naturally had strengths and naturally had weaknesses and complement them? And I think the question you're asking on the soccer side is just one of those things. But I would say Julie always works hard on Angel City, and there's moments and times where I get to be a pure investor and just spend a lot less time on it. And there's times where I feel like an operator next to Julie in very specific areas. And I think the first year we both worked our butts off, and then Julie worked a lot. And the last year, I would say we both did this topic specifically. Fortunately, I'm not involved with, so you take the soccer question.
Julie, as you jump in here, I just want to frame this because I'm a few months as we sit here into explicitly being a refounder of a company. I was brought in to refound this company. You're running the company that you started. You're actually refounding your own company. Yeah. So what's the trigger where you realize I've got to do this, and then what does that look like when you do it?
Yeah, I mean, Kara was right. Because we never built a sports team before, we could build it the way we wanted to. And we got a lot right, but we also saw the opportunity for growth. I think the biggest area really was on the soccer side.
Hmm.
It's one thing to bring all these operators together that have never worked together before, but I'd done that before. So I know about marketing, I know about sales, I know about finance, I know about customers. So I could always lean in and flex a different muscle because I had experience. But I'd never built a soccer team before. And the chemistry that the coaches need to have, the chemistry that the performance and medical team have to have, the trust they have to have amongst each other is pretty significant. And our year one team was incredibly diverse, which we thought actually at the time would be an asset. But when you're bringing in people from the NFL or the MLS or, different from college, from pro, and their backgrounds are different, their language are different. So we had individuals from the US, we had individuals from Europe and the UK, and what we call an athletic trainer, they call a personal trainer. And what they call a personal trainer, we call an athletic trainer. So we actually learned that incredible amount of diversity wasn't beneficial. And so we turned maybe 80% of our entire soccer operations house from coaching to performance to medical
In what time
after
period?
our first year.
After your first
In
year?
a couple of months.
In a couple of months. Wow.
And then so again, to your point, we're sort of rebuilding, relearning, and adding as we go, like improving the staff, improving the facilities, improving the operations. And to your point, we weren't winning at the beginning of the year. And that's a really hard decision for any team. It's, do you want to fight your way out of it? Do you have the right leader? Will a change actually be positive? And when you're making that change, do you have enough opportunity to get the best person? And soccer and the NWSL is a challenge when it comes to that. We play the global sport on the global landscape, but our calendar is different from the rest of the world. So in the summer, when we were thinking about making a coaching change, you had the rest of the season continuing, you had Europe about to start, and then you had the World Cup about to start, where there are so many incredible coaches that when the World Cup is over, you probably have an opportunity to grab any one of those. But if I'm going to wait for a World Cup, a World Cup coach from a different country, I couldn't make any decisions at that moment in time in the summer when we were looking at it. And we felt that the biggest positive impact to our team would be a change. And luckily we got that right. We went on 11 game, we went on a 11 game unbeaten streak, which means mostly wins and some ties, and found our way into the playoffs as the fifth best team in the NWSL.
With a bicycle kick.
Yeah, it was super.
Yeah.
It was super exciting. Yeah, I'm really curious about how you talked earlier about the kind of the co-opetition nature of sport, because it's actually okay to share a lot of the best practice here. It's good for the rising tide to lift all boats. Arguably, Angel City has been the rising tide that has lifted the National Women's Soccer League, because club valuations a few years ago, you could get a franchise for single-digit millions, and now they're going for 40 to 50 million at the lowest end, with you all approaching a $200 million valuation. I don't know if you're public about it. I can say that. We'll leave it there. So I'm struck by first game this year's against the new San Francisco club. There are tech luminaries in San Francisco. There are precious few Jennifer Garners and Gabrielle Unions and Sophia Bushes up there, Natalie Portmans, et cetera. How is the rest of the league taking the Angel City playbook and benefiting from it without the advantage of the celebrities that you guys have been able to bring in?
Look, they're only an advantage if you know how to use them.
Fair.
Right? So Bay FC has something that's unique to them, which is they were founded by four former U.S. Women's National Team players, and Danielle Slayton, Allie Wagner, Brandy Chastain, and Leslie Osborne. And so they started to build the momentum and excitement. They were working on Bay FC a year before they ever got the expansion rights. Same thing. If you join us, we will bring a franchise to San Francisco. And then to your point, being in the world of tech, they were able to bring in a partner with Sixth Street, which is a private equity company, and Alan Waxman, who said, you know what? It is my job to invest in businesses, to drive scale, to drive valuations. And I believe there's something special here in the NWSL, and partnered with these four incredible women to build Bay FC.
And I think critically, it sounds like if just a few years ago, as you all and Natalie were out raising money, I'm not going to call out Sixth Street specifically, because any number of firms that look like Sixth Street, we're just saying no. And now they're trying to
Oh,
get their money
they're
out.
competing. And
Yeah.
to Kara's point, it's a syndicate.
Mm.
So there are these four incredible women. You have the backstop of Alan and Sixth Street, but you have Sheryl Sandberg investing. I mean, their ownership group is probably 60 people deep. Because again, if you get people to come together, you can create something pretty spectacular.
It sounds like this notion of a collective is really become, it's a different way of thinking about funding an organization.
Well, and I think the analogies to tech are really strong, right? It's sort of like we've all been involved in high growth tech companies. And when it works, somebody calls and says, how do I get a growth marketer? Remember when everybody would call us in LA and be like, I was told by my venture capitalist I need a growth marketer. Where is one? And the teams that work are the ones that are authentic, the ones that know what A+ talent look like, the ones who can get people from the best people in sports, but also the best people in tech, in media, in nonprofit, in community building. The best people want to work for capital that gets them, that sees them, that understands them, that builds friction between how much is too much and how much is not enough. And so, again, I mean, if you look at the highest performing teams in the NWSL, Portland's a special city, and but they have very heavy female ownership or leadership, and I think building syndicates of male allies of women. I mean, again, like I launched this fund called Monarch Collective, and we get to be invested in the Boston team, and we're looking at other sports. And when we approach it, I call Julie, I'm like, how does this sound to you? And it's not Angel City exactly, but it is that blueprint. And I think I do think one of the things that's different about me and Julie and Natalie is how we see each other and how we show up psychologically and support each other in strengths and weaknesses, and then how we want to help others and open source these blueprints. And we have to be thoughtful now because there's lots of people, but Kansas City, as an example, was started by a woman named Angie Long, her husband Chris too, but Angie is one of my friends from college. She called me up the day we announced and she said, how do I do this? Before people were paying attention, we had just announced. And then, Julie got on the phone with her and shared the model and all of these things. And you don't see that in men's sports. And so I think building communities that reflect your community, and not just bringing in Sheryl Sandberg because she's Sheryl Sandberg to not be involved, but Sheryl, like she cares,
To
right?
show up.
She shows up, she cares. And so it's much more important to get a woman who's going to show up and do work than a big name or somebody who has endemic roots to Philadelphia than, someone who doesn't, and to be really thoughtful about what are my strengths as a control owner. And then how do I complement this in a way that feels really real to this local community and the players on the pitch who have say to us all the time, it matters to see people like you and Julie who know our names and talk to us and come to every game. And, we live for this stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm struck by, not just in the stadium, not just outside the stadium on game day, but everything around Angel City, it just feels like you guys have built a culture of winning, right? Where it's built into your DNA. Am I right? And where does that come from? Was that intentional? Help me understand more about that.
It started by having higher expectations than anyone thought possible. We walked into our first investor pitch and we said we were going to get 10,000 fans, and nobody believed us. They said, you'd be lucky if you get 5,000. You'd be lucky if you get 8,000. But I think...
And how many did we get, Julie?
We've sold out 5 games our last year of 22,000 fans with an average of 20,000 fans.
Yeah.
So, we've season ticket holders that break 16,500 of a 22,000 seat stadium, which is pretty incredible. So one was having really high goals. The second part was recognizing that winning didn't just mean on the pitch. It didn't just mean winning a game. It meant giving back to our community. It meant building attention and awareness for women's sport. It meant driving the value of our individual players up. And then, yes, ultimately winning on the pitch. But we were able to focus on everything but the soccer for a good year and a half, which gave us a really long runway. In our second year, we make the playoffs. In our third year, our goal is to win the championship. We believe we can do that. Winning on the pitch helps everything. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't defined only by winning on the pitch, because then that would affect our community building, our sense of belonging, and ultimately the revenue and the value that we could drive for the club.
And when you talk about winning, I mean, 2 things came up for me. I mean, one is this idea that like this word authenticity, which like it's, you know it when you feel it and you see it. But I still feel it all the time. It's like the world does believe, right? And every time you see a new record broken by the Black Ferns in New Zealand or Caitlin Clark or whatever it is, you feel it. I got to tell you, though, I'm getting the chills just saying it, being in a room and believing in the way we believe, it brings people along who don't go along where that belief isn't there. And A+ talent want to work with people who believe, and then you got to build trust, because you're going to make so many mistakes in sports. You're dealing with bits and bytes and atoms and people and mission and all of these things, and like just like having each other's backs and building trust. And so when you talk about winning in the boardroom, I mean, I felt, this is going to date me as a reference, but you guys look at this like Chinatown, like that scene with Jack Nicholson sometimes with Julie, my mother, my sister, the Faye Dunaway scene, where sometimes I felt like the investor, right?
Yeah.
And I'd bring like that friction to our relationship. And then it's like, no, now I want to support the team. But I think having a flexible mindset as a board member, you know, which we're fortunate to have that in a lot of places, around when to do things the old way, when to do things the new way, and how to build trust is going to be the most important thing for Angel City continuing to grow.
Well,
As it
I
does.
think, well, I would say
Yeah.
the one thing that's really different about sports and technology is the unpredictability of sports, right? Tech is unpredictable. You may not grow as fast as you want. You may not get the customer base on as fast as you want. Your AOV may not be as strong as you want, but there's a range. In sports, there's so much unpredictability. The weather, scheduling, right? We play in someone else's stadium. If they're make the championship game of some tournament and it happens to be on the same day as one of our games, like we're going to have to move. The injury of players, right? You don't plan for players getting injured. You don't plan for mid-season coaching changes, right? And so there's, which makes the sport beautiful, right? But there's so much unpredictability in sports that you need board members and a board that is flexible and understands that. And in our case, in most cases, it's money that solves the problem, right? It's not like, well, I can spend less or I can cut here. It's not about cutting. When Kristen Press goes down, I need one, maybe two players to replace her. And what does that do to my, salary? And what does that do to the locker room? And what does that do to the pitch, right? So it needs a little bit different of a level of flexibility.
Well, and part of what I'm hearing is it's a combination of the entrepreneur's mindset of, okay, let's look at how it's been done before and borrow from it where we should, but not let that constrain us. And secondly, and critically, no upper limits.
Yeah.
No
right?
upper limits.
Which is something that I don't think we've seen in women's professional sports in this country ever before, and you guys have really brought forward.
And looking at the fundamentals, so people say to me now, as I'm fundamentally an operational investor, an investing-oriented operator. Who knows? I'm on a journey to find out. But
but this is what Monarch's doing. Monarch is investing in women's sports related.
Yeah, but like maybe one or two in a year, and we spend every day with those teams. Like we're hands-on. We're bringing in talent. We're bringing in playbooks. We're bringing in knowledge of facilities. But it really is. It is also about the discipline of looking at what are the revenue components, what are the cost components, how are they changing, what is predictable, how do you underwrite a P&L, what are the lowest costs of capital, when do you bring and so a lot of those things are the same, but it is this. There has to be like product market fit is much easier, right? Butts and seats. And everything flows. Main revenue streams are very well known. But showing up and the authenticity of this, like what is authenticity? It's Julie and I talking to each other at 2 a.m. Well, maybe not 2 a.m. because we're getting older.
You're on
But
your
like I
Wikipedia
think
now.
Julie and I
Dark
have
out.
spoken 1 to 3 times a day, every day for the last 14 months.
Wow.
Easily.
So I want to bring us to a close with this question. There's a wonderful documentary series about Angel City on HBO Max. I want to fast forward 20 years, and whatever the streaming service that we're watching on, whatever device we're watching on at that time, is doing the movie or the TV series about Angel City and your journey with it. What's it called, and who's playing each of you?
Oh, you go first.
I mean, I have like
to think.
10,000 titles.
Give me one. Give me two.
Butterflies and Cathedrals.
Ooh, nice.
Paths to Power, Paths to Joy. I don't know. I think it's something about following your energy, about really co-creating in a team lens where we're not just celebrating an individual, but everyone who comes along on the journey, looking at the divine feminine and masculine and how it comes together. And finding joy and purpose. I think, we're all in these professional organizations as things succeed, and all people talk about are joy and purpose. And I don't think I could find more joy and purpose in what we do together.
Thank you.
And sometimes that scares me because it's what I've been looking for without realizing it my whole life. And I think women's sports is that, but so is music and democracy and things of that nature. I'm going to go with Julianne Moore. or
Outstanding.
Sarah Snook.
Okay, I love them both.
One of both of them. I'm a hardcore identify as a ginger, so I would need to be somebody with that.
You want
Maybe an Emma
representation.
Stone.
There we go.
Can
Great.
we talk about
Yeah,
this?
absolutely.
My answer is so different than Kara's, which is why we work so well together. I mean, this couldn't be a better question. So it would be called Angel City because everybody's going to know what Angel City is. Everyone's going to want to associate with it. Everyone's going to want to be a part of it. Everyone's going to feel joy from it. So it would be called Angel City. Look, in 10 to 20 years, I want us not only be the most valuable women's sports team in the world, be the first $1 billion women's sports franchise, but be able to show meaningful impact in our community. We have a plan right now in the next 3 years where we'll be able to get over 200,000 kids playing soccer. That sounds like a really big number. It might be 20,000 kids. But the point is non-pay to play. Like we will have created something and fundamentally changed how kids can play sports going forward where money isn't the barrier to do that. So how I judge winning is on sort of multiple different facets. As far as who's playing me, I mean, I guess it can't be Natalie Portman. That would be
Natalie doesn't want to play herself.
I mean, that would be... Yeah, it's I have no idea, but it's a really fun thing to think about.
Well,
Thanks,
and the
Jeff.
exciting thing is you've got an ownership group and a fan base that gives you a lot to choose from on that front. So
true.
I so appreciate you all, what you do in the world, your time, your
Jeff,
friendship.
should we end this the way that we start every single Angel City football match?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for your listeners who don't know, it was started by Julie Foudy when she went to the Olympics in 2018 and was stuck in her hotel room for COVID. And she would do these daily videos where she'd say what was going on and she'd be working out and she'd start every video with 3 claps and she'd say, "Hello, party people, what's going on?" And so we decided to steal it, basically, with her permission. And so
open source.
Yes. So we start every single Angel City match where everybody in the stadium together welcomes our players with a 3 clap that ends with, as Julie would say, a grunt that is from the soul that has so much meaning. And it's really just our way to kick off a game. So maybe we can end.
All right, so let's do it.
So I will do the countdown.
You can handle it.
I think I can handle it.
I mean, you are a season ticket holder. You know how this works.
Let's do this.
All right, so I'll count you down. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Oh!
Yeah? Awesome.
You guys are the best. Thank you.